You know what they say, Beyonder. Whoever is worthy will possess the power of Thor!
Jane Foster, Thor's love interest, is more than just his squeeze in the Marvel Universe. Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Terry Cooper and this is Marvelous Videos. Marvel fans have a special place in their hearts for Thor, the mighty hero from Asgard. He may be a god, but despite his incredible powers, he's not without his flaws. The various story arcs to date have portrayed him as arrogant, too proud of his strength, and often ignorant of certain issues.
You are a vain, greedy, cruel boy! And you are an old man and a fool!
His shortcomings make him all the more relatable for us fans, and the excitement for the upcoming Marvel Studios movie Thor: Love and Thunder is at an all-time high. The trailer has only added fuel to the fire, and from Christian Bale playing Gorr the God Butcher to the greatest challenge that Thor has faced so far, the trailer is filled with interesting tidbits.
So this is my vow. All gods will die.
However, one of the most intriguing things in the trailer has to be the presence of Jane Foster. Thor's estranged girlfriend, played by Natalie Portman, has been an unforgettable presence in the franchise so far, but never before has her character been assigned more importance. We see her wielding Mjolnir, and she suits up like a superhero fighting alongside Thor. In this video, we'll bring you all there is to know about this side of Jane, the source of all her superpowers, and how she flies into action in the Marvel Universe. It's time to get all the facts before you hit the theaters. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Now, let's begin. Jane's tenure as Thor, the iconic saga. It was a comic issue in 2014 titled Thor No. 1, If He Be Worthy, where it all began. The story begins with an attack by the Frost Giants on a sea base. Meanwhile, Thor is shown trying to lift Mjolnir in vain. He sits dejected before the powerful weapon, and it's not clear what exactly made him lose the ability to wield it. Things started to go wrong after his fight with Nick Fury, where Fury whispered into Thor's ear. Later, it was revealed that he had whispered something about Gorr the God Butcher being right in his actions. Following this event, he fails to lift his hammer, and for some reason he's in a more weakened state than usual. Odin is curious about what Nick Fury might have told Thor, but his son doesn't respond. The All-Father is annoyed about the whole thing, and he gets further agitated when he finds that even he can't lift Mjolnir any longer. His own creation becomes an embarrassment for him, and in this turmoil, his ravens inform him that the Frost Giants have attacked Midgard. Thor is determined to find a suitable weapon for himself, but the mystery is still unresolved. What could have possibly gone wrong that made both Thor and Odin unworthy of the mighty weapon? Later, Thor is seen wielding the Jarnbjorn while fighting the Frost Giants, but the real highlight of the story is when we see a female figure saying, "There must always be a Thor," while holding the hammer. Mjolnir is successfully lifted from the ground, and this is where Jane Foster is shown having the powers of Thor. The mighty hammer sought out Jane telepathically, and Heimdall helped her to reach the location. She started to become familiar with the powers and use of Mjolnir, and she knew it would require a purpose to be fulfilled with all the superpowers. It becomes clear that Thor is no longer the one and only God of Thunder, and the fans are shocked to witness the identity of the real contender. Jane initially keeps her identity a secret, and it almost drives Thor crazy to not know who has control over his hammer. Finally, when he realizes that the new Thor is worthy and capable of handling the deadly weapon, he relinquishes his name and starts to go by the name Odinson. Even Odin makes an attempt to retrieve Mjolnir from Jane, and he uses the God of Fear, his brother Kull, for the purpose. Jane manages to face the conspiracy like a true warrior, and eventually, she remains an asset for the security of Asgard and the universe. The cancer story makes her a brave heart. What's a superhero without a great sacrifice or a fascinating tragedy? Well, Jane Foster has both if you observe her origin stories closely. She was only a child when her mother passed away from cancer. Her father, however, tried his best to fill the void and worked 2 jobs so that she could go through medical school. As fate would have it, even her loving father died from a heart attack, and the young lady grew up alone in a harsh world. This fiercely determined and intelligent woman is shown to be suffering from breast cancer in the comics. Every time she becomes Thor, her chemotherapy becomes practically worthless, and yet she selflessly chooses to tap into her powers to fight the evil forces. She answered Iron Man's call when she was required to defend Washington from Hydra, trying to take over the USA. She also protects Asgard against some powerful enemies, but during one of those fights, she succumbed to her injuries. Odin, however, felt a strong sense of gratitude towards her, and he helped to resurrect her. He admired the way she chose to tap into her superpowers one last time, even though it meant that she wouldn't survive. She became a Valkyrie, and that's the most badass change to her character that you could possibly imagine. She still had cancer, and it's ironic how the all-powerful superhero is still vulnerable to such a mortal disease. It's already been revealed that the upcoming movie will utilize parts of her cancer storyline and explore more about how a new superhero is born. Jane Foster in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Let's refresh your memories on how Jane Foster was portrayed in the previous Marvel movies. In the first Thor film, she was shown to be a notable astronomer. She worked alongside Dr. Erik Selvig, who was her father's colleague, and dedicated her life to scientific research. She was studying a strange weather anomaly that she believed to be related to an Einstein-Rosen bridge.
What you seek, it's a bridge.
Like an Einstein-Rosen bridge?
More like a rainbow bridge.
She travelled to the source along with Dr. Selvig and their intern Darcy, and it turned out to be a deserted region in New Mexico. Just when Selvig was starting to think that Jane's hunch was wrong, they witnessed a powerful vortex forming in the skies. They drove into the vortex and ended up hitting a man who turned out to be Thor. He was banished by Odin for disobeying his orders, but it was all an elaborate plan by Loki, who wanted to take the opportunity to get rid of his brother. The madman kept claiming to be Thor, but initially they all thought of him as crazy. However, there was something unique about him that kept Jane engaged.
Darcy, farewell.
She followed his journey as he tried to retrieve Mjolnir, which was kept in a secret research base by S.H.I.E.L.D. He wasn't worthy any longer. When S.H.I.E.L.D. agents arrested Thor, Dr. Selvig came up with a plan to free him, claiming him to be just a crazy person. Meanwhile, another vortex forms in the desert, and this time, the Destroyer has been sent to destroy everything in the region. The Warriors 3 and Sif also arrive to help Thor, but without Mjolnir, he isn't powerful enough to stop the Destroyer. Even though he knows it would be a suicide mission, he risks everything to save his friends and the people on Earth. This act of sacrifice made him worthy of the hammer once again, and after reclaiming Mjolnir, he puts an end to the Destroyer in no time. Jane kisses him goodbye, and he promises to come back for her. Jane went on to become an expert on Asgardian cosmology and became an advisor for S.H.I.E.L.D. She kept trying to develop a wormhole to reach Thor, but he was busy dealing with greater troubles in the universe. Later, in Thor: The Dark World, Jane is seen entering an abandoned factory, where she accidentally gets teleported to another dimension. She ends up absorbing the ether, which would take her life if not treated immediately. Thor takes her to Asgard, and eventually Thor and Loki take her to Malekith and the other Dark Elves. Loki tricks Malekith into pulling the ether out of her, and Jane is healed. Meanwhile, the Dark Elves were attacking Earth, and they had to be eliminated quickly. She travels back to London alongside Thor through a portal and works alongside him to send the elves back to another dimension. It appeared as though Loki had sacrificed himself in order to help his brother and Jane escape safely, and after returning to Asgard, Thor tells Odin about Loki's gallantry. He refuses to take the throne and leaves for Earth, but a last-minute twist shows that Loki was impersonating Odin, and he's alive and well. The post-credits scene shows Jane and Thor reunited on Earth, but a frost monster from Jotunheim is running loose, so clearly their peace will be short-lived. How Jane met Thor in the comic book story arc. We've already spoken about her tragic backstory and how she dealt with the loss of her parents. Jane went on to become a nurse, and Dr. Donald Blake hired her as his assistant. In the comics, Donald Blake was simply a host human body for Thor, created by Odin, who thought that it was important for Thor to learn some humility. He made Thor surrender Mjolnir, and he was sent to Earth as a crippled young student studying medicine at Harvard University. This was Donald Blake, who initially had no memory of his true identity. It turned out to be a valuable lesson for Thor, who learned a thing or two about caring for others. He became a successful physician and established himself as a talented surgeon. He fell in love with Jane, who worked as one of his nurses, and they even traveled to a war-torn San Diablo to treat casualties. Meanwhile, he stopped the executioner as Thor, and Jane started to develop feelings for him. It was a confusing situation, with Jane attracted to both Blake and Thor without knowing that they were the same person. Their relationship had several ups and downs, and Odin initially didn't approve of his son falling for a mortal. He wanted to see if Jane was brave enough to be transformed into an immortal, and she had to deal with plenty of challenges. Thor's enemies would often attack, and even his foster brother Loki planned an elaborate cunning scheme to trouble them both. Eventually, Thor defied the orders of his father and revealed his dual identity to Jane. He took her to Asgard, where Odin put her through another test to see if she was ready to become an Asgardian goddess. She was granted superhuman powers, but when she seemed confused and scared, it was all taken from her. She was sent back to Earth as a mortal, and her memories were erased. based. She started to work for a physician named Dr. Keith Kincaid, and they fell in love. Even when they got married, Jane continued to be involved in various conflicts relating to Thor. Just as we have seen in the movies, their love life in the comic books was never a very smooth ride, and the various story arcs kept testing their bond under extreme circumstances. What makes Jane so powerful? When she wields Mjolnir as Thor, her powers are similar to that of Odin's son. She gets incredible strength and speed, and she also has a healing mechanism that allows her to recover from deadly wounds. However, it doesn't cure her cancer, only keeping it at bay while she retains her Asgardian form. She can command and manipulate thunder and lightning just like Thor, and her appearance is almost like that of a female equivalent of Thor. Of course, Mjolnir is one of the strongest weapons in the universe, and it has the power to knock down the strongest of opponents. As a Valkyrie, she can perceive death almost like a sixth sense. It gives her the ability to magically teleport herself, and as a Valkyrie, she can use the artificial magical wings to fly. Overall, Jane Foster is an absolute powerhouse, and it seems astonishing when you consider her mortal background. She's an ordinary human destined for excellence, and when the opportunities present themselves, she is always willing to embrace the challenges.
Very, very impressive what you did back there.
It's just my first bag.
Natalie Portman returning after a long break. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has a very different version of Jane than what you will find in the comic books. Natalie Portman, who did a wonderful job in the first Thor movie, was last seen in Thor: The Dark World. Thor: Ragnarok didn't feature her, and many started to wonder if the actress had bid a final goodbye to the role. As it turns out, she's returning after being promised a chunkier role. If the trailer is any indication, her character will be quite intense, and the glimpses of the fight scenes that we have seen so far are very promising. Be prepared for a rocking chemistry between Chris Hemsworth and Natalie Portman, and we hope that the story will be suitably engaging to complement their skills. A few final words. Thor: Love and Thunder is almost upon us, and we simply can't wait. Thor is back on the big screen after a very long time, and we certainly hope that it will be worth the wait. Christian Bale as a menacing antagonist is also going to be one of the showstoppers, but we're curious to know what becomes of Jane, who has now achieved the ability to wield Mjolnir. Do let us know in the comments below where you think the story will take her. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.
What's it been like? 3-4 years?
8 years, 7 months, and 6 days, give or take.